I think you're referring to this, aren't you? This is the corvus, or rather was the corvus. It was a device Rome incorporated into its navy around 260 BC, and it was there primarily to buy them some time, because at that point, it's the beginning of the First Punic War. This is largely a series of naval engagements, and Rome are, pun intended, out of their depth when it comes to going up against the Carthaginians in that particular theatre of war. They haven't got a great navy. Carthage, on the other hand, have, largely because they've got their Phoenician heritage. They've been doing the whole being in ships, going around the Mediterranean for centuries. They're very, very good at it. Their crews are very well skilled. The Roman crews, less so. In fact, this is much of a new thing that Rome had to learn and adapt to. And they're not getting the best of it. So what they decide to do is try and change the game up a bit and effectively make the sea battle into a sort of mini land battle. And that is done through the corvus. The corvus was effectively a drawbridge that could be pivoted around. So whilst you were sailing around, it would be held vertically. When you engage with the enemy, it would be, you could move it around and then you could just drop it horizontally on the enemy deck. And it was around 11 meters long, that's 36 feet, and around 1.2 meters wide, that's about 4 feet. And it did what you imagined. You could then use soldiers to gain access to the enemy ship and force a hand-to-hand battle going on there. And this changed things up. And this was a temporary thing. We don't see much of this being used towards the end of the Punic War, or the First Punic War. And the thoughts are that by that point, Rome had actually been able to grind the Carthaginian navy down enough and been able to upskill its own navy enough to redress that balance that was obviously there, and glaringly so, at the beginning of the First Punic War. I don't think anything changes in terms of Rome using another type of ram at all. Everything's pretty much the same. And if anything, you kind of want to keep the same ram because you want to get your crews used to being able to use that. Plus, it wasn't a case of just putting on a different ram. The whole ship was built around supporting the incredible pressure that you'll be putting through that point of the prow. So you don't really want to change things up too much. It's just this gives Rome a different option to buy their crews some time to get more experience and that kind of a thing. And the first time they use it is actually in 260 BC, and it works because the Carthaginian navy, they come up against the Romans and they think easy pickings. Then these things start dropping around them and they don't really know what to do, because you could just use this as obviously a way to engage the enemy by going on their deck, but you could also just fix them and hold them. You didn't necessarily need to do anything else with them. So I wonder as well if when the Carthaginian navies or fleets after this point are coming up against the Romans, they're seeing these things hoisted up, and perhaps they're thinking about how they have to engage it differently. So it's putting the Carthaginians on the back foot, making them think that they might have to do something a bit different now because they don't want to get anywhere near one of these. So again, I think this is quite a clever way because it forces Carthage to rethink some tactical approaches on how they engage with the Roman navy. Rome is buying itself some time because come the end of the First Punic War, we don't really see these used much. By that point, they've been able to degrade the Carthaginian navy and also upskill their own navy to redress that balance and close that gap between the two.